The cold, sterile halls of Concordia Orbital Station hummed with their usual efficiency, a background noise that Dr. Aristhorn had long since learned to filter out. His fingers traced the edge of a display case, his reflection ghosting over the polished glass that protected a Maxim gun, a century-old relic that had once thundered across battlefields, spitting lead and death in equal measure. Now it rested in silent dignity, part of his museum of human conflict. Beautiful in its own way, isn't it? Eris murmured to himself, adjusting his spectacles as he leaned closer to inspect the feeding mechanism. Few visitors shared his appreciation for these antique instruments of war, but that never diminished his enthusiasm. There was something honest about these old weapons, straightforward in their purpose, ingenious in their design despite their primitive nature. The overhead lights flickered momentarily, signaling the attachment of a new vessel to the station, the Cathar diplomatic shuttle, right on schedule. Eris checked his watch and sighed. As curator of the museum, he was required to provide cultural tours to important delegations. The Cathar Collective had specifically requested a tour of human military history, though rumors suggested their interest was more derisive than scholarly. He straightened his jacket and made his way toward the reception area, rehearsing his usual introduction in his head. Social interactions had never been his forte. He was more comfortable with the silent company of his artifacts than navigating the complex dance of diplomacy. But duty was duty. The reception area bustled with activity. Concordia served as a bustling interspecies trading hub and diplomatic center, one of humanity's proudest achievements in the century since they'd achieved faster-than-light travel. Representatives from a dozen species mingled under the vaulted ceiling, their varied physiologies and cultural adornments creating a living kaleidoscope of galactic society. The Cathar delegation stood apart, their tall, willowy frames draped in shimmering garments that seemed to bend light around them. Even standing still, they projected an aura of superiority, their large eyes constantly shifting, taking in everything with calculated interest. Eris knew their reputation, a telepathic species with technology centuries beyond human capability, particularly in the realm of energy manipulation and defensive systems. They were new trading partners, having only made contact with Earth's expanded territories in the last decade. Ambassador Xyler stood at the center of the Cathar group, his silvery skin reflecting the overhead lights, creating an almost halo-like effect. A subtle field of energy hummed around him, a personal shield, standard equipment for Cathar dignitaries even in supposedly safe environments. Not out of fear, Eris had been told, but as a display of their technological prowess. Ambassador Xyler. Eris approached with a slight bow. I am Dr. Aristhorn, curator of the Museum of Human Conflict. It's my honor to welcome you to our humble exhibition. Xyler's mouth curled into what approximated a smile among his species. Ah, the keeper of primitive curiosities, he replied, his voice melodic but tinged with unmistakable condescension. My aides insisted I should witness this collection, a cultural obligation, they called it. The ambassador's entourage, 5 other Cathar, and 2 human diplomatic attaches, shifted uncomfortably at his bluntness. One of the humans, a young woman with striking features and alert eyes, gave Eris an apologetic look. Indeed, Eris replied evenly, swallowing his irritation. Cultural exchange is a foundation of mutual understanding. If you'll follow me, we'll begin with pre-spaceflight weaponry, which forms the bulk of our collection. As they moved through the museum's chronologically arranged exhibits, Eris noticed the Cathar's reactions transforming from mild disinterest to outright amusement, occasionally exchanging glances and whispered comments that didn't need translation. Their derision became increasingly apparent as they reached displays of 20th and 21st century firearms. You mean to tell me, Xyler interrupted Eris's explanation of assault rifle development, that your species spent centuries essentially perfecting the art of launching small metal projectiles at high velocity? How quaint. The principles may seem basic, Eris countered, but the engineering precision required for reliable operation under extreme conditions represented significant technological achievement for its time. Like watching primitives perfect the sharpened stick. One of Zyler's aides commented in accented English, triggering ripples of amusement among the delegation. Eris felt heat rising to his face, but maintained his professional demeanor. Perhaps context would help. These weapons were designed within the constraints of the materials and energy production capabilities of their era. Their efficiency. Zyler waved a long-fingered hand dismissively. Your species spent thousands of years developing increasingly elaborate ways to propel objects using chemical explosions. Meanwhile, my ancestors had already developed particle manipulation. He raised his hand, and a small sphere of shimmering energy formed above his palm. This could disable any of these toys without physical contact. And that was 10,000 years ago. The energy dissipated with a gesture. By the time we reached your current level of spaceflight, we had abandoned physical weaponry entirely. Violence itself became inefficient. The tour continued in this vein, with Zyler and his entourage treating each exhibit as some quaint relic of barbarism, occasionally laughing outright at Eris's earnest explanations of the technological innovations represented. Their particular disdain was reserved for the ballistic missile and nuclear weapon displays. You actually deployed these against yourselves? Zyler asked, genuinely shocked when viewing imagery of Hiroshima. We had assumed such weapons were theoretical experiments, not actually used. Unfortunately, yes, Eris acknowledged grimly. Only twice in war, though hundreds were tested. They represent both humanity's technological achievement and moral failure. Savage children playing with fire, Zyler pronounced, turning away from the display. It's remarkable your species survived long enough to reach the stars with such inclinations. By the time they reached the final exhibit, early spaceflight weapons and defense systems, Eris's pride in his work had been thoroughly deflated. Every attempt to highlight the ingenuity behind these developments was met with thinly veiled mockery. What do you call these primitive projectiles? Zyler asked, pointing at a preserved missile guidance system. That's from an ABM system, anti-ballistic missile defense. It represents one of the first successful attempts to counter nuclear delivery systems. Countering one barbaric technology with another, Zyler laughed. It's like watching children throw rocks at each other, then developing slightly larger rocks as defense. As the scheduled tour came to its merciful conclusion, Zyler addressed his delegation loudly enough for Eris to hear. A fascinating anthropological study in primitive problem-solving. One almost feels nostalgic for such a brutal but simplistic approach to conflict. How fortunate that more enlightened species have moved beyond such crude methodologies. The Cathar filed out, their energy shields subtly pulsing in what Eris had come to recognize as an expression of amusement. Only the young human diplomat lingered behind, approaching Eris after the others had departed. I apologize for their behavior, she said, extending her hand. Lena Petrova, junior diplomatic attaché. The Cathar can be challenging. Eris shook her hand, grateful for the simple gesture of human courtesy. Dr. Thorne, though you already knew that, and no apology necessary, it's hardly the first time I've dealt with interspecies cultural friction. It's more than that, Lena said, glancing toward the exit. The Cathar genuinely believe themselves superior in every meaningful way. Their technological advantage has reinforced a cultural arrogance that's becoming problematic in negotiations. I noticed, Eris replied dryly. Though I must admit, their energy manipulation technology is indeed impressive. Makes our kinetic weapons look rather blunt by comparison. Lena leaned closer, lowering her voice. Between us, I found your exhibition fascinating. I've always thought there's something to be learned from historical approaches to problem solving. Not everything old is obsolete. That's refreshingly open-minded, Eris said, surprised by her interest. Few people appreciate that these weapons weren't just tools of destruction. They represented the cutting edge of human innovation in their time. Each one tells a story about the conditions and constraints that shaped human development. I'd like to hear more of those stories sometime, Lena replied with a genuine smile. When I'm not escorting pompous telepaths. Their conversation was interrupted by the station's communication system. Dr. Thorne to administration. Security briefing in progress. Your presence is requested. Eris frowned. Unusual. I'm not typically included in security matters. The rumors have everyone on edge, Lena observed. Perhaps they've finally decided to take them seriously. Rumors? You haven't heard? The Void Syndicate has supposedly been attacking ships in the outer sectors. Trading vessels disappearing, communications disrupted. Nothing confirmed yet, but intelligence suggests something coordinated. Eris nodded thoughtfully. I should go. It was a pleasure meeting you, Lena. Likewise, Doctor. I hope our paths cross again under more pleasant circumstances. The security briefing was already underway when Eris arrived, slipping quietly into the back of the conference room. Captain Elena Vasquez, Concordia's head of security, stood at the front, gesturing toward a holographic display of nearby space sectors. Third incident this month, she was saying. The pattern is becoming clearer. These aren't random pirate attacks or navigation failures. Something is systematically disabling vessels, particularly those with advanced propulsion and defense systems. Any visual confirmation of the attackers? Asked Administrator Chun, the station's civilian leader. Negative. Survivors report their systems simply failed. No warning, no detectable energy signatures. One moment operating normally, the next dead in space. Most concerning is that emergency systems were similarly affected, something that should be impossible given their isolation protocols. Eris listened with growing interest. The description triggered connections in his historical knowledge, electronic warfare tactics, EMP effects, strategic paralysis theory. What we do know, Vasquez continued, is that older vessels seem less affected. The merchant ship Galileo, using retrofitted 22nd century engines, managed to limp away from an encounter. Meanwhile, the Quantum-class Starstreamer, brand new with state-of-the-art everything, was completely helpless. Technological regression as a defense? Someone scoffed. More likely a targeting algorithm focusing on high-energy signatures, another officer suggested. Eris raised his hand tentatively. Excuse me, but this sounds reminiscent of certain historical tactics. All eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from surprise to mild irritation at the interruption. Dr. Thorne, Administrator Chun acknowledged with obvious reluctance. While we appreciate your historical expertise, we're dealing with a contemporary security threat. With respect, Administrator, history often repeats itself in warfare. This pattern, targeting sophisticated systems while simpler ones remain functional, mirrors several historical precedents. The electromagnetic pulse effects of nuclear weapons, for instance, or early computer viruses that exploited complex systems while ignoring basic ones. Captain Vasquez narrowed her eyes. You're suggesting this is some kind of wide-scale dampening field? That technology doesn't exist. Not in our experience, Eris countered. But we've encountered less than 1% of spacefaring species. The principle is sound. Target the complexity itself rather than attempting to overpower it. And what would you suggest, Doctor? That we abandon our advanced defenses and rely on museum pieces? The security chief's tone made it clear she considered the idea absurd. Eris felt his face flush. Not exactly, but perhaps a contingency based on simpler mechanical systems that could function independently. Thank you, Doctor, Administrator Chen interrupted. We'll take your historical perspective under advisement. For now, let's focus on practical security measures within our technological capabilities. The discussion moved on, and Eris sat silently, his suggestion dismissed. But the parallel continued to trouble him. Throughout history, over-reliance on technological superiority had repeatedly proven disastrous when confronted with unexpected countermeasures. The Maginot Line, stealth technology vulnerabilities, quantum encryption backdoors, all examples of supposedly impenetrable defenses circumvented by innovative approaches. After the briefing concluded, Eris returned to his museum, his mind still wrestling with the implications. In the quiet after-hour solitude, he began pulling research materials, comparing historical instances of technological hubris with current security protocols on Concordia. The pattern was disturbingly clear. The station's defenses were entirely dependent on energy-based systems, shields, particle beams, automated targeting algorithms. If those systems were somehow neutralized, the station would be nearly defenseless. He was deep in his research when a soft knock interrupted his concentration. Lena Petrova stood in the doorway, looking both concerned and intrigued. "Working late, Dr. Thorne?" "MS. Petrova." "Yes, just following up on some thoughts from the security briefing." She stepped inside, glancing at his scattered notes and historical texts. "I heard you made quite an impression. Not everyone appreciated your historical perspective." "Few ever do," he replied with a wry smile. "History is often viewed as irrelevant until it suddenly isn't." "I think you might be onto something," she said, surprising him. "The diplomatic channels are buzzing with classified reports. More attacks, following the same pattern you described. Advanced systems failing catastrophically while simpler technology remains unaffected." Eris straightened in his chair. "The Cathar ships, they're completely dependent on energy manipulation. Technology. Their entire civilization is built around it. Precisely why they're dismissing these reports as exaggerations or technical failures," Lena said. "They can't conceive of anything bypassing their defensive measures. Their arrogance may prove costly. It wouldn't be the first time a technologically superior force underestimated a more primitive opponent," Eris mused, pulling up historical records. "The British against American colonists, mechanized armies bogged down by guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare against physical infrastructure." Lena leaned over his shoulder, studying the displays. "You think Concordia could be a target? It's a significant diplomatic hub with advanced defense systems. If I were planning a strategic strike to cause maximum disruption, it would be high on my list. Have you shared these concerns?" Eris sighed. "I tried during the briefing. Security isn't interested in historical analogies." "Then perhaps we need to prepare independently," Lena suggested, her expression serious. "Just in case your historical parallels prove prophetic." The following days saw increased security measures throughout Concordia, but none addressing the vulnerability Eris had identified. The Cathar delegation continued their negotiations, dismissing rumors of attacks with characteristic condescension. Zyler was particularly vocal in Security Council meetings, assuring station leadership that Cathar defensive technology was impervious to any known weapon system. "These shipboard failures are clearly maintenance oversights or operator error," he declared during one particularly heated session that Eris observed from the back. "No force in known space can penetrate our energy manipulation fields. They adapt instantaneously to any attack signature." The confidence was infectious. Station security relaxed, focusing instead on conventional threats, smuggling, espionage, the usual concerns of a busy trading hub. Only Eris and Lena continued their quiet preparations, cataloging potential resources and drafting contingency plans that earned them skeptical looks from colleagues. "You actually maintain these in working order?" Lena asked incredulously as Eris showed her his workshop adjacent to the museum, where several historical weapons had been preserved in functional condition for research purposes. "Historical authenticity requires understanding operational mechanics," he explained, demonstrating the action on a heavy machine gun. "These aren't just for display. They're teaching tools. Each one represents problem-solving within constraints." "And potentially our last line of defense," Lena murmured, running her fingers along the barrel of a sniper rifle. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." 3 days later, it did. The attack came during station night cycle, when minimal staff manned critical systems. Eris was in his quarters, reviewing conservation techniques for metal artifacts, when the lights flickered and died. The emergency systems activated, then faltered, casting the room in dim, uncertain light. The constant background hum of the station's systems faded to silence. His communication device was dead. The environmental controls stuttered, then stabilized at a basic level. Looking out his viewport, Eris saw that the usual shimmer of the station's defensive shield was gone. Instead of panic, he felt a strange, calm certainty. He dressed quickly, grabbed his emergency kit, and headed for the museum. Along the way, he passed crew members in varying states of confusion and fear, attempting to restore systems that refused to function. The few operational screens showed only static or basic diagnostic information. As he approached the diplomatic sector, the scene became more chaotic. Cathar delegates huddled together, their normally composed demeanor shattered. Their personal shields flickered weakly or had failed entirely. Without their technology, they seemed smaller, their confidence evaporated. Ambassador Xyler stood amid the confusion, his elegant features contorted with fear as he attempted to reactivate his personal communicator. When he spotted Eris, his expression shifted to desperate hope. "Dr. Thorne, what is happening? Our systems, nothing works properly. Even our telepathic network is disrupted, clouded. Is this some kind of human sabotage?" "Not human," Eris replied grimly. "I believe we're under attack by the Void Syndicate. They've deployed some kind of dampening field that neutralizes advanced energy systems. Your technology, our defenses, anything sophisticated is compromised." "Impossible," Xyler whispered, but without conviction. "No technology could bypass our adaptive shields." A distant explosion rocked the station, followed by the sound of tearing metal. Alarm klaxons sounded briefly, then fell silent. "They're boarding," Eris said. "We need to move. Now." "Where?" "The escape pods require power systems that clearly aren't functioning." "The museum," Eris replied. "It has independent backup systems for preservation purposes, and more importantly, tools that don't require advanced energy sources to function." Xyler's eyes widened with realization. "Your primitive weapons." "Precisely. Suddenly less primitive than they seemed during your tour, aren't they?" Eris led the ambassador through service corridors, gathering other stranded personnel along the way. They encountered Lena helping an injured security officer, her diplomatic composure replaced by focused efficiency. "Dr. Thorne," she greeted him with evident relief. "Your prediction was right. Station defenses are completely down. Security reports boarding parties at 3 access points. Their weapons are functional, ours aren't. The museum has independent power and mechanical defense options," Eris explained quickly. "We're gathering everyone we can find." By the time they reached the museum's reinforced doors, their group had grown to nearly 20, station personnel, diplomatic staff, and 4 Cathar, including Xyler. Eris used his manual override to unlock the doors, ushering everyone inside before sealing them again. The museum's emergency lighting cast an eerie glow over the displays of historical weapons. Eris moved quickly to his workshop, where he began accessing storage containers hidden beneath innocuous research equipment. "I thought this was just a museum," said a bewildered security officer named Malik, his energy pistol hanging uselessly at his side. "It is," Eris replied, unlocking a cabinet. "But I also research functional mechanics. Everything here is maintained in its original condition, including operational capacity." He lifted out a heavy machine gun, its metal gleaming in the dim light. M2 Browning, .50 caliber. Designed in 1918, still in use 3 centuries later. Purely mechanical operation, chemical propellant, kinetic projectiles. "You expect us to use these antiques?" a Cathar technician named Veeler asked, his voice wavering between disdain and desperate hope. "Unless you'd prefer to surrender to whoever's boarding us," Eris replied calmly, continuing to unpack weapons and ammunition. "The beauty of these antiques is that they don't rely on complex energy matrices or targeting algorithms. They're immune to whatever dampening field is affecting our advanced systems." Lena stepped forward, examining a rifle. "I had basic historical weapons training at the academy. Never thought I'd need it." "I have extensive experience," Eris said, "and we have a defensive advantage. This museum was built with reinforced walls to protect the artifacts. It's one of the most structurally sound sections of the station." The next hour was a crash course in historical warfare. Eris assigned positions and weapons based on physical capability and what limited training some possessed. The security officers adapted quickly, their professional training transferring reasonably well to the unfamiliar weapons. The Cathar were more hesitant, but fear proved a powerful motivator. Listen, Eris gathered them for final instructions. These weapons are loud, deafeningly so, and they produce smoke, recoil, and heat. They're not clean or precise like energy weapons, but they are effective. Aim for center mass on the borders. Their armor may be energy resistant, but it won't stop high-velocity projectiles. He looked at Xyler. Ambassador, I suggest you and your aide Wheeler assist our engineer Torres with fortifying the secondary entrance. Xyler, stripped of his technological superiority, nodded without protest. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by a humble gratitude that might have been satisfying under different circumstances. The first test of their defenses came within the hour. A small group of boarders, humanoid figures in sleek armor that seemed to absorb light, attempted to breach a service entrance to the museum. They clearly expected minimal resistance, advancing with the confidence of predators certain of their prey. Eris had positioned Malik with a vintage M14 rifle at a concealed angle to the entrance. The security officer waited until the boarders had committed to the narrow corridor, then opened fire. The thunderous report of the rifle echoed through the museum, startling everyone despite Eris's warnings. The effect on the boarders was even more dramatic. The high-powered rounds punched through their advanced armor, designed to disperse energy weapons but offering little protection against kinetic penetration. Two fell immediately. The others retreated in evident shock and used to facing effective resistance. It worked, Malik reported, his voice tight with adrenaline but tinged with newfound respect as he ejected the spent cartridge. Their armor crumpled like paper. A cheer went up from the defenders, quickly hushed by Eris. They'll be back, and in greater numbers. That was just a probe. Conserve ammunition and maintain discipline. He was right. Within hours, station. Communications partially restored by their engineer indicated that the Void Syndicate had secured multiple sections of Concordia. Their dampening field remained in effect, rendering standard defenses useless. Only their improvised resistance in the museum sector prevented complete control. The Syndicate, realizing the museum represented an unexpected pocket of resistance, devoted increasing resources to neutralizing it. Each assault was repelled, though not without cost. Two defenders were injured, their positions taken by others. Ammunition began running low for certain weapons, forcing adaptation and conservation. What surprised Eris most was the transformation of the Cathar. Wheeler, initially the most skeptical, proved remarkably adaptable once he overcame his cultural aversion to primitive technology. His understanding of spatial geometry made him an excellent spotter, identifying vulnerabilities in the attacker's formation and armor design that others missed. Even Ambassador Xyler found purpose, applying his diplomatic training to maintain morale and facilitate communication between the diverse defenders. The arrogance that had characterized him during the museum tour was gone, replaced by genuine respect for human resourcefulness. I never understood, he confessed quietly to Eris during a lull between attacks. We thought technological advancement was linear, that complexity always superseded simplicity. But there is elegance in these mechanical solutions. Reliability we sacrificed for power. Different tools for different circumstances, Eris replied, checking the ammunition supply. The most advanced solution isn't always the most appropriate one. History teaches us that repeatedly, if we're willing to listen. Their conversation was interrupted by Lena's urgent call from her observation position. Multiple hostiles approaching the main entrance. At least 20 heavy equipment. This is their main push, Eris announced, moving quickly to coordinate defenses. They've realized we're a threat and committed significant resources. Malik, take the heavy machine gun position. Torres, prepare the improvised explosives for the approach corridor. Wheeler, we need your eyes on their formation patterns. The final assault began with a coordinated attempt to breach all access points simultaneously. The defenders, now working as a cohesive unit, responded with disciplined fire and tactical retreats when necessary. The museum echoed with the thunder of ballistic weapons, the Browning machine gun hammering out an industrial rhythm, rifle shots punctuating the cacophony, the dull thump of improvised mortar fire in the distance. In the smoke and chaos, Eris moved between positions, redistributing ammunition, adjusting fields of fire, evacuating wounded. The smell of cordite filled the air, stinging eyes and throats, a sensory experience from warfare long past brought violently into the present. The turning point came when the Syndicate forces, frustrated by their inability to overcome what they'd expected to be token resistance, committed to a frontal assault on the main entrance. Eris had anticipated this desperation and prepared accordingly, concentrating their heaviest firepower and most experienced operators at that position. The result was devastating. The Syndicate troops, filing into the fatal funnel of the entrance corridor, faced interlocking fields of fire from multiple vintage heavy weapons. Their advanced armor, designed to disperse energy attacks, offered minimal protection against the brutal physics of high-velocity projectiles. The attack collapsed into a retreat, leaving the corridor littered with fallen attackers. In the stunned silence that followed, Lena's voice came over their jury-rigged communication system. Something's happening station-wide. The dampening field is fluctuating. Eris felt a surge of hope. The station's outer defenses or a rescue ship must be engaging the Syndicate vessel generating the field. The next minutes brought confirmation as systems throughout the station began reactivating, power returning in surges as the dampening effect weakened. Security channels crackled with reports of Concordia Defense Forces rallying, supplemented by an Earth Alliance vessel that had arrived with reinforcements. Within the hour, the dampening field collapsed entirely. The Syndicate, their technological advantage neutralized and facing unexpected resistance, began a fighting retreat toward their remaining ships. Station security, now with fully functional weapons and systems, systematically reclaimed control of compromised sectors. When the all-clear finally came, the defenders in the museum emerged exhausted but triumphant. Their improvised stronghold had held, not only surviving but actively disrupting the Syndicate's attack plan and buying crucial time for reinforcements to arrive. In the days that followed, Concordia slowly returned to normal operations. The damage was extensive but reparable. More significant was the psychological impact. The station's vulnerability had been exposed, but so had its resilience. A formal recognition ceremony was held in the station's Grand Hall, where Administrator Chen personally commended those who had defended the museum sector. Eris found himself unexpectedly in the spotlight, his historical knowledge and foresight now recognized as invaluable assets rather than academic curiosities. Dr. Thorne's understanding of historical warfare patterns and technological vulnerabilities saved countless lives, the administrator announced. His foresight in maintaining functional historical artifacts provided our only effective defense during the critical early hours of the attack. In recognition of this service, the Station Council has approved the expansion of his museum to include a new strategic historical analysis department focused on applying historical lessons to contemporary defense planning. The applause was gratifying, but more meaningful to Eris was the changed perspective of those who had fought alongside him. Lena Petrova, officially appointed as liaison between diplomatic services and the new department, stood nearby with evident pride. The security officers who had once dismissed his historical analogies now sought his insights on defensive contingencies. Most profound was the transformation in the Cathar delegation. Ambassador Zeiler, addressing the assembled crowd, displayed a humility that would have been unimaginable before the attack. "My people have long prided ourselves on our technological advancement," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "We mistook complexity for superiority, dismissing simpler approaches as primitive or obsolete. This arrogance nearly proved fatal." He turned toward Eris. "Dr. Thorne showed us that true technological wisdom isn't about abandoning the past, but understanding its lessons. The Cathar Collective formally requests a cultural exchange program focusing on human historical technologies and their applications. not as curiosities, but as valuable knowledge. The trade negotiations resumed with a fundamentally different tone, one of mutual respect rather than condescension. The Cathar, humbled by their experience, engaged more honestly with human representatives, while humans developed new appreciation for Cathar expertise in areas where their technology truly excelled. 1 week after the ceremony, Eris found Ambassador Xyler in the museum after hours, studying the display of a Colt 1911 pistol with intense concentration. "Something particularly interesting about that one?" Eris asked, approaching quietly. Xyler looked up, no longer startled by Eris's presence. "The simplicity of its operating mechanism fascinates me. 7 moving parts to reliably harness a controlled explosion and direct its force. No power source beyond the chemical energy in the cartridge. No programming or targeting algorithm. Yet effective enough to remain in service for over 3 centuries. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most enduring," Eris observed. "My people have much to learn from yours," Xyler admitted. "Not about creating more powerful technology, but about creating more resilient systems. We became so focused on advancement that we forgot the value of reliability, of redundancy, of simplicity, and perhaps we've rushed too quickly to abandon proven methods in favor of flashier solutions," Eris countered. "There's wisdom in both approaches." Xyler nodded thoughtfully. "The future of both our species may depend on finding that balance." As they stood contemplating the lessons of history and the promises of the future, the museum, once a mere repository of humanity's violent past, had transformed into something more, a bridge between species and a reminder that progress wasn't always a straight line forward. Sometimes it required a thoughtful look backward to move most wisely ahead.